Adiz sat in the corner of the alley, her clothes torn and stained from the dirt of the street. The air smelled of rot from the trash bins nearby, and flies buzzed around her. She had no strength to move. Her husband's angry words still echoed in her mind. He had shouted at her, called her names, and finally pushed her out of the house as if she was nothing. She had begged him not to leave her in the street, but his eyes showed no care. He turned away and did not look back. Her tears rolled down, making small marks on her dusty face. She had once believed in love, believed that marriage would bring her happiness and a home. Instead, it had brought her pain. Adiz thought of her parents, who had died long ago, leaving her with no one to defend her. She had entered her husband's house with hope, but all she found was cruelty. Now she was sitting among trash, left like she was useless. The night grew darker, and people passed by the alley. Some looked at her but did not stop. A few shook their heads, whispering, "Poor girl," but kept walking. Others laughed, saying, "She must have done something bad to end up there." Their words cut her heart even more. Adiz wished someone would sit beside her, ask if she was fine, or even give her a little water. But no one cared. Hunger burned in her stomach. She had not eaten since the morning, and now her body shook from weakness. She thought about standing and walking, but her legs felt heavy. She leaned against the wall, closing her eyes for a moment, hoping sleep would take away her pain. But sleep would not come easily. Her mind was full of memories, memories of when she was younger, when she used to laugh, sing, and dream. Now, it felt like those dreams had been buried. She remembered the day she married. She had worn a simple but beautiful dress, and she had smiled, thinking her life was beginning a good chapter. Friends had congratulated her, and neighbors had wished her well. She had trusted her husband, thinking he would protect her. But soon after, he started blaming her for everything. If business went bad, it was her fault. If he was angry, he shouted at her. Slowly, the love she had hoped for turned into fear. And now, the final blow, he had thrown her away like garbage. As the night became colder, Adiz hugged herself, trying to stay warm. She whispered softly to herself, "Why me? What did I do to deserve this?" Her voice trembled, but no one answered. The stars shone above, but the city lights drowned their beauty. In the alley, she felt invisible. A stray dog came near, sniffing around the trash. Adiz was scared at first, but the dog only looked at her with tired eyes and then lay down a few steps away. For a moment, she felt less alone. Even this dog has no home, she thought, yet it lies near me. Maybe we are the same. She reached out a weak hand, but the dog stayed where it was. Still, its quiet presence gave her a little comfort. She thought about running away, finding another town, starting fresh. But where would she go? She had no money, no family, no friends to call. All she had now was her heart, still beating, still alive, even though it felt broken. She wondered if life could ever change. Could there be hope after this pain? As she sat there, a group of young boys passed by, laughing loudly. One of them pointed at her and said, "See the woman sitting with the trash. Her husband must have chased her away." They all laughed and walked on. Adiz closed her eyes and held her breath until they were gone. The shame was heavier than the hunger. The hours passed slowly. The city quieted down as midnight came closer. Adiz felt weaker. She wanted to sleep, but she was afraid. What if someone attacked her? What if her husband returned with more anger? What if this alley became her grave? Tears filled her eyes again. But deep inside, a small voice whispered, "You are still alive. Do not give up." That voice gave her a little strength to lift her head. She looked at the end of the alley, where a dim light shone from the street. Somewhere beyond, life was moving, people eating, people talking, people living. She was still part of that world, even if the world had turned its back on her. Adiz's story was not yet over. She did not know what tomorrow would bring, but she knew she had to endure this night. The pain was real, but so was her spirit. Even if the world left her in the trash, she still carried something inside her, hope, though faint, still alive. And in that same night, unseen by her, fate was already preparing a path that would change her life forever. Chief Obinna had just returned from a late business meeting when his driver slowed down near the alley. The night was quiet, the streets half empty, and the car's headlights cut through the darkness. As the vehicle rolled forward, Obinna caught sight of something unusual, a figure sitting close to the trash bins. He frowned and told the driver to stop. When he stepped out of the car, the cool night breeze touched his face. At first glance, he thought it was just another beggar, one of many he had seen on the streets. But then, as his eyes adjusted to the shadows, he saw her face. It was pale, tired, and covered with dust, yet there was something striking about it. Adiz lifted her eyes, and for a brief moment, their gazes locked. Obinna expected to see only despair in her eyes, but instead, he saw something else, dignity. Even in her broken state, there was a quiet strength in the way she sat, her back against the wall, her hands folded together. She was suffering, that was clear, but she was not begging. She was not reaching out to him for money or help. She simply looked at him, and that silent look touched something in his heart. "Who is she?" Obinna asked quietly, almost to himself. The driver shrugged. "Just a homeless woman, sir. Many like her on these streets." But Obinna shook his head slowly. "No, not just homeless. Look at her eyes." He stepped closer, and Adiz shifted nervously. She pulled her torn shawl tighter around her shoulders. She did not know who he was or why he had stopped, but she could tell from his clothes and the shiny car behind him that he was a rich man. Part of her wanted to turn her face away, to avoid the humiliation of being seen in this condition, but she was too weak to move. "Are you all right?" Obinna asked, his voice softer than he expected. Adiz hesitated. No one had asked her that question in a long time. She wanted to say she was fine, but her lips trembled. I have nowhere to go," she whispered. Her words were simple, yet they struck Obinna deeply. He had built his empire on numbers, contracts, and profit. He was known in business as a man without emotion, one who cared only about results. Yet here, in the quiet alley, a woman with nothing but brokenness had spoken words that carried more weight than all his wealth. For a moment, Obinna stood in silence. He thought about the world he lived in, lavish parties, endless meetings, people bowing before him for favors. But this woman was different. She was not bowing. She was not flattering him. She was simply surviving. And somehow, that survival looked braver than the battles he fought in boardrooms. "Do you have family?" he asked gently. Adiz shook her head, tears welling up. "No one," she said. Her voice cracked. "Even the one who should have cared for me, left me here." Obinna felt a heaviness in his chest. He did not need to ask who that one was. He could see from her tone that it was her husband. Anger stirred in him, not the sharp anger of business competition, but a quiet, steady anger against cruelty. How could any man throw away a woman like this? "Get her some water," Obinna told his driver. The driver quickly fetched a bottle from the car and handed it to Adiz. She held it with trembling hands and drank slowly, each sip giving her a little strength. When she finished, she looked up again, and Obinna was still standing there, watching her with eyes that seemed to study her soul. "You should rest," he said, almost like a command, but his tone was kind. "It is not safe here." Adiz lowered her eyes. "I have nowhere else to go," she repeated softly. Obinna's thoughts wrestled within him. He had built walls around his heart for many years. People only came to him for money or power, and he had learned not to trust easily. Yet this woman stirred something he had long buried, a compassion he thought he no longer had. He wondered why. Why her? Why tonight? Finally, he sighed and spoke. "Come with me." Adiz's eyes widened in surprise. "With you?" "Yes," he said firmly. "You cannot stay here." For a moment, she hesitated. Fear gripped her. Could she trust him? He was a stranger, and strangers often carried danger. But something in his voice made her believe he was not here to harm her. His eyes did not show pity or pride, they showed respect, something she had not felt in a long time. Slowly, she nodded. With great effort, she tried to stand, but her legs shook. Obinna, without thinking, reached out his hand. She froze for a second, then placed her weak hand in his. His grip was steady and strong, lifting her gently to her feet. The driver looked uneasy but said nothing. He opened the back door of the car, and Obinna guided Adiz inside. She sank into the soft seat, almost overwhelmed by the comfort. 4 years, she had sat on cold ground, and now she was in a luxury car. It felt like a dream she did not deserve. Obinna sat beside her, still silent, still thoughtful. The car began to move, leaving the dark alley behind. Adiz looked through the window at the passing lights, her heart unsure of what was happening. Was this man truly kind, or was she stepping into another trap? She did not know. But for the first time in a long while, she felt a spark of safety. Chief Obinna, on the other hand, stared at her quietly. He did not yet understand why he had stopped for her, why he had brought her into his car. But deep inside, he knew this meeting was not by accident. Something had begun, something neither of them could yet see fully. The night was silent, but both their hearts were awake, sensing that this encounter was only the beginning of a story that would change them forever. Chief Obina's car moved smoothly through the night until it stopped in front of a private hospital. Without wasting time, Obina stepped out and called for help. Nurses hurried forward, surprised to see their city's most powerful man bringing in a weak woman who looked like she had been living on the streets. They did not ask questions. His word was enough. Adiz was lifted gently onto a stretcher and carried inside. The bright hospital lights made her close her eyes for a moment. For so long she had been surrounded by darkness, dirt, and rejection. Now, for the first time in years, she was in a place that smelled of safety and care. The nurses cleaned her face, gave her fresh clothes, and placed her in a quiet room. An IV drip was connected to her thin arm, and slowly her body began to regain strength. Obina stood by the door, watching silently. He had been in many hospitals before, but always for business donations, political visits, or to check on his investments. Never had he come as a savior for a broken soul. Yet tonight, this one act felt more important than all the millions he had given away. Something in Adiz's quiet dignity had moved him beyond words. Hours passed, and Adiz slept peacefully. When she finally opened her eyes, the first thing she saw was Obina sitting nearby, his arms crossed, his eyes fixed on her with a strange mix of concern and curiosity. She blinked, unsure if she was dreaming. "You are safe now," he said softly. Adiz swallowed hard, her voice weak. Why are you helping me?" For a moment, Obina did not answer. He looked down at his hands, then back at her. "Because no one deserves to be treated like trash," he said firmly. "Not someone like you." Tears filled Adiz's eyes. Those words pierced her heart. For so long, she had been told she was worthless, that she was a burden. To hear the opposite from a stranger felt unreal. She tried to speak, but her voice broke into sobs. Obina rose and moved closer. "Don't cry," he said gently, handing her a glass of water. "Just rest. When you are ready, you can tell me everything." The following day, Adiz was stronger. The nurses had given her food, and her cheeks no longer looked so hollow. As Obina entered her room, she sat up slowly, her eyes shy but calmer than before. "You said you wanted to hear my story," she whispered. Obina nodded. "Only if you want to tell it." And so, she began. Her words were slow at first, but once she started, the pain that had been locked inside her heart began to pour out. She told him about her marriage, how she had loved a man who promised to protect her but instead turned into her greatest enemy. She told him about the cruel insults, the endless blame, and the beatings that broke not only her body but also her spirit. Finally, she told him how her husband abandoned her like a worthless object, leaving her near the trash bins. Obina listened in silence. Every word cut deep into his chest. He clenched his fists, anger rising in him at the thought of any man discarding a woman so graceful and gentle. He had seen betrayal in business, but this was worse. This was betrayal of love, betrayal of trust. When Adiz finished, her eyes filled again with tears. "Maybe he was right," she whispered. "Maybe I am nothing." Obina leaned forward, his voice strong and clear. "Do not ever say that again. You are not nothing. The way you survived, the way you held your dignity even in the gutter, it shows strength many people with wealth will never understand. You are far more than what he made you believe." Adiz looked at him, stunned. No one had ever spoken to her like that. His words were not just kind, they were healing. For the first time in years, she felt seen, valued, and respected. Obina sat back, his eyes thoughtful. He had seen beauty in her soul that no amount of wealth could buy. He realized that Adiz, though broken, carried a light inside her that could never be destroyed. And he wondered silently why fate had brought her into his life. Day after day, Obina visited her in the hospital. He brought fruits, books, and sometimes just his presence. Adiz found herself slowly trusting him. She noticed how he listened with patience, never rushing her, never looking at her with pity. He looked at her as a person, not as a burden. The hospital staff whispered among themselves. They had never seen Chief Obina care for anyone so personally. He was a man known for his power and wealth, but here he was, sitting beside a broken woman as if she was the most important person in the world. One evening, as the sun set and the golden light filled the room, Adiz turned to him. "Why are you really doing this?" she asked again, her voice steadier than before. Obina took a deep breath. "Because I see something in you, Adiz. Something rare. I don't know yet what it means, but I know this, your life is not over. And as long as I am here, no one will ever throw you away again." Adiz's lips trembled, but this time she smiled through her tears. It was a small smile, fragile yet beautiful, like the first flower blooming after a storm. And in that quiet hospital room, something unspoken grew between them. Not love yet, but a deep respect, a connection that neither could explain. Chief Obinna had rescued Adi's body, but without knowing it, he was also beginning to rescue her heart. The city outside continued with its noise and speed, but inside that room, two souls had begun a journey, one of healing, hope, and a future that neither had imagined. Obinna was a man of decisions, and when he made one, he never turned back. After Adi's health improved at the hospital, he decided that her life on the streets had ended forever. He told his driver to prepare the car and informed Adi gently that he was taking her to his home. At first, she hesitated, afraid that it was too much kindness for someone like her. But Obinna assured her, "You deserve a chance at life, not just survival." With slow steps and a heart filled with both fear and hope, Adi left the hospital and entered a new chapter. Obinna's mansion was large, with wide gardens, tall gates, and rooms that sparkled with beauty. When Adi first stepped inside, she could hardly believe her eyes. She had gone from sleeping near trash bins to walking on marble floors. The servants looked at her with curiosity, some even with doubt. To them, she was a stranger, a poor girl suddenly brought into the home of their powerful master. But Obinna silenced their whispers with a firm voice. "She is under my care. Treat her with respect." From that day, Adi's life began to change. She was given her own room, with soft sheets and warm clothes. For the first time in years, she slept peacefully, without fear of being pushed, insulted, or abandoned. Every morning, she woke to the sound of birds singing in the garden instead of the harsh noise of the streets. But Obinna's kindness did not stop at shelter and food. He encouraged Adi to continue her education, something she had once dreamed of but lost when her cruel husband took everything from her. He arranged tutors to help her catch up on the years she had missed. At first, Adi doubted herself, but Obinna reminded her each day, "Your mind is sharp, Adi. Do not waste it." Slowly, she began to believe him. Her days became filled with learning and discovery. She studied in the mornings, helped in community projects in the afternoons, and spent evenings talking with Obinna. He listened to her ideas and often smiled with pride when she spoke with wisdom and compassion. The people outside, however, did not see what Obinna saw. Many whispered behind his back, saying, "Why is the great Chief Obinna wasting his time on a poor, abandoned woman? She is just another rescued girl." Some even accused Adi of using pity to climb into wealth. But Obinna ignored their words. He had built his empire by trusting his own judgment, and in Adi, he saw a rare strength no one else could recognize. Adi herself heard the whispers too. At first, they cut her deeply. She wondered if she truly belonged in Obinna's world. But whenever she thought of giving up, she remembered his words, "Do not let anyone define your worth." Slowly, she built her confidence. She began to walk with her head held high, not in pride but in dignity. Her kindness and humility soon won the respect of those around her. The very servants who once doubted her now admired her. They saw how she treated everyone with fairness and compassion, never forgetting her own past suffering. As months passed, Adi transformed. She was no longer the broken woman left in the trash. She became a symbol of strength, intelligence, and hope. Women from the community came to her for advice, young girls looked up to her, and even businessmen respected her opinions during meetings Obinna allowed her to attend. She had found her voice again, and with it, a new purpose. Through it all, Obinna remained by her side. Their friendship grew deep and steady. He trusted her with matters he never shared with others. She, in turn, trusted him with her heart, something she thought she could never open again. The bond between them was not rushed or forced. It was built day by day, with honesty, respect, and care. Sometimes, in quiet evenings, they would sit together in the garden, talking under the stars. Adi would share her dreams of helping women who suffered like she once did. Obinna would listen, his eyes filled with admiration. "You have a heart that can heal others," he told her. And in those moments, Adi felt seen not as a rescued woman but as someone with true worth. One evening, Obinna surprised her with a simple question. "Adi, do you know what you have given me?" She shook her head. He smiled softly. "You gave me back my own humanity. I had money, power, and respect, but I had forgotten how to truly care. You reminded me." Those words touched Adi more deeply than any gift of wealth could. She realized then that their lives had intertwined in a way neither of them had planned. What started as an act of rescue had grown into something greater, trust that blossomed into love. Adi did not need to hear the word love to know it lived quietly between them. It was in the way Obinna listened to her voice, in the way he defended her dignity, and in the way he smiled when she spoke her heart. For the first time in her life, she was valued not for what she gave or what she lacked, but for who she truly was. The world outside continued to talk, some with admiration, others with jealousy. But Hades no longer feared their words. She had found her new beginning, and in Obinna, she had found someone who saw her not as broken but as whole. It was not the riches of his mansion or the titles of his name that gave her life meaning again, it was his belief in her. And in return, Hades gave him something money could never buy, genuine love and companionship. Their journey was only beginning, but already it was clear, the woman once abandoned in the trash had risen higher than anyone imagined, not through wealth alone, but through dignity, kindness, and a bond that no rumor could destroy. The day came when the city could no longer ignore what had quietly been happening in Chief Obinna's life. Rumors had spread for weeks, whispers of the billionaire chief seen often with the woman everyone once called worthless. Some said it was madness. Some said it was charity. Few believed it could be love. But when Obinna stood before the people and announced that he was going to marry Hades, the very woman who had once been abandoned in the trash, the whole city was shaken. The wedding was simple but full of meaning. It was not the gold decorations or the endless cars that caught people's eyes, it was the sight of Hades walking with dignity, her face glowing with strength and peace. She was no longer the broken woman she had once been. She stood tall, her steps firm, as though the pain of her past had shaped her into someone unshakable. By her side, Obinna looked not like a man of power but like a man who had finally found what his heart was searching for. Many could not believe what they were seeing. How can a billionaire marry a woman who was once thrown away like trash? Some asked. Others, however, whispered in admiration, this is not weakness. This is true strength, seeing worth where others saw nothing. For every voice of doubt, there was another voice that spoke of hope, for the story of Hades and Obinna was becoming more than a marriage. It was becoming a lesson for the city. After the wedding, Obinna and Hades began to use their union as a force for change. Together, they built programs for women who had been abandoned and for children living in the streets. Hades, who once knew what it was like to sleep in the dirt and be rejected, led the programs with compassion that touched everyone she met. When she spoke to the women, her voice carried both gentleness and authority. I was once where you are, she would say. But you are not broken. You are not trash. You are precious. Her words gave life to hearts that had long been silent. Women who had lost hope began to stand again. Children who once wandered with hunger now had food, schools, and safe homes. And Obinna, who had always been known as a man of wealth, became known as a man of kindness. Whenever reporters or guests praised him for his generosity, he would always shake his head and say, "Do not thank me. It was Hades who saved me too, she taught me that love is the greatest treasure." In quiet moments, Hades would remember the alley where her husband once left her, broken and hopeless. The memory no longer brought her tears. Instead, it reminded her of how far she had come. She understood now that her story was not just about pain, it was about transformation. From the lowest place, she had risen to stand beside one of the most powerful men in the city, not because of luck, but because she never let cruelty steal her dignity. The people began to see her not as the woman Obinna rescued, but as the woman who rescued Obinna's heart. And in truth, she had. For though Obinna had money and influence, his life before Hades had been empty. He confessed it to her one evening as they sat in their garden. I had everything people dream of, he told her, but I had nothing real. You gave me real love, Hades, and through you, I found peace. Hades smiled softly. And you gave me back my life. You showed me that even broken things can be made whole again. Their love became the kind of story people told in marketplaces and in homes. Children grew up hearing about Hades, the woman who rose from the trash to become a queen in her own right. Women whispered her name with hope, reminding each other that no matter how low life pushed them, kindness and true love could lift them higher than they ever dreamed. As the years passed, Hades continued to shine as a leader, not with the power of wealth but with the power of compassion. She sat with the poor, she listened to the weak, and she worked with her own hands to make sure no one else would feel the pain she once felt. People often wondered how she had the strength to do so much, but the answer was simple: she remembered. She remembered hunger, she remembered rejection, and she remembered the alley where her life nearly ended. Those memories gave her a fire that nothing could put out. Obinna remained by her side, proud of her, protecting her when critics tried to bring her down, and honoring her when the world raised her up. To him, Hades was not just his wife, she was his partner in purpose, his equal in love, and the one who completed the life he never knew was empty until she filled it. One day, at the opening of a new shelter for abandoned children, a reporter asked Adiz what her greatest treasure was. The crowd expected her to mention the mansion, the cars, or the life of luxury she now lived. But she simply smiled and said, "My greatest treasure is love. Love saved me, love lifted me, and love gave me back my life." The words spread across the city like fire. They were repeated in schools, written in newspapers, and spoken in homes. Slowly, the city began to change. People who once judged others for being poor now thought twice. Men who once abandoned their wives out of pride or anger remembered Adiz's story and held on to their families. And women who had lost hope lifted their heads again, saying to themselves, "If Adiz could rise, so can I." Her life had become more than her own, it had become a testimony. A living proof that no matter how low someone is pushed, love and kindness can lift them to heights beyond what they ever imagined. And so, Adiz's name lived on, not as the woman who was abandoned, but as the woman who turned rejection into power, pain into hope, and weakness into strength. And whenever people spoke of Chief Obinna, they never forgot to mention her, for even he said it clearly, "I may have rescued Adiz from the trash, but she rescued me from emptiness. She taught me that true riches are not found in banks, but in the heart." That was how the city remembered them, not just as a powerful couple, but as a story of love that changed lives.